I'm sitting in Charleston, South Carolina, just before the Mere Anglican Conference, and I'm joined here with Archbishop Duncan of the Anglican Church in North America. And boy, this is our second time in a row meeting in Charleston in some secluded location talking about the Anglican Church.
Kevin, it's good to be with you, and it's good to be in Charleston, and yeah.
Now, I'm actually catching you kind of on a plane hopping tour here. You're spending today in Charleston, then you're flying to the an event in Washington, D.C. that is of very particular importance to the Anglican Church.
That's right. Tomorrow will be the 40th anniversary March for Life in Washington, and of course Anglicans for Life is one of our missionary organizations. Our Constitution and canons make us a church that's for life and for the protection of everybody from the unborn to the most senior in the church. And so I'm going to go and join 14 other bishops that I'm aware of, and we're going to make the march and simply hold up the challenge to the folks in this nation and around the world about God's attitude toward life and us not stepping where really it's God's.
Somehow we miss the Psalms, don't we?
Yeah, you know, fearfully and wonderfully made. I knew you in the womb. I formed you in the womb. Yeah. Again, there have been over 50 million abortions in these 40 years. Just to imagine the lives that have been lost and the wonderful creativity and giftedness that might have been ours, it's troubling. Mother Teresa, of course, had things to say to the American people, that any nation that kills its children is a nation in very deep trouble.
Yeah, that's still evident and will be for a long period of time, and it may hopefully one day be something that we get to repent of.
Yeah. Well, again, I think what we're up to in the Anglican Church in North America is proclaiming what we're for, not what we're against, and we're for life.
Absolutely.
And we're for all of the creation and all of the children born of men and women.
Now, I talked with you in November when we were in Charleston, and you've been on quite a whirlwind tour since then. You went first to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where you had a primates GAFCON meeting, and there seems to be some struggle setting up the next GAFCON. And the struggle isn't so much it is kind of a logistical thing, because you have to find a place that'll have visas that will take in Nairobians and stuff like that. What are some of the struggles, and what is the GAFCON going to be about? Right.
Well, it has been a whirlwind, and indeed, I went to Dar es Salaam via Singapore for the investiture of the new Bishop of Singapore, and of course for mission meetings in Southeast Asia. But the importance of the Global Anglican Future Conference and of a second Global Anglican Future Conference is the gathering of faithful Anglicans and the working together across all the borders and all the provinces in order to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to the whole world. The Jerusalem Conference, GAFCON I, was at such a timely moment, and of course it was that first GAFCON that, in addition to the Jerusalem Declaration and the GAFCON statement, made a call for the foundation of the province here in North America. And without that call, it would have been hard to imagine us doing what we did. That call came in June of 2008, and the Anglican Church in North America was constituted, and I was invested in June of 2009. So tremendously significant gathering. Again, a gathering in contrast in some measure to Lambeth, where the communion and its structures have been, as opposed to what the global Anglican future looks like. We're not a British movement anymore. a global movement, and we're about about proclaiming Jesus, about his transforming love all over the world. We're not about old structures and things which aren't working so well anymore, or things in which are terribly compromised or restrained by those who really aren't agreed anymore about the faith. So GAFCON II, yes, it's been hard to determine what location we could be in. The mutual commitments have been that everybody in the world, every diocese, part of every province that wants to participate can. And so while we would have loved to have met again in the Holy Land, it was impossible for many of our bishops who are in Islamist regimes to come and be with us. They can't go there. We did it in Jerusalem the first time because we wanted to proclaim our roots, and in fact it was more important to be related to Jerusalem than to Canterbury. Sure. We value Canterbury very much. We also looked at the possibility of meeting somewhere else in the New Testament world, and it became clear that there were visa problems, major visa problems, for many Africans when we were dealing with any country in the European Union.
Sure.
So finally, we came to the notion that Nairobi was the place for the next GAFCON. It'll take place in the week of October 20th, 2013 in Nairobi. There'll be folks represented from the GAFCON provinces, of course, which ACNA is one, but also invitations to those who can sign on to the Jerusalem Declaration from everywhere, whether it's Britain or Australia or anywhere else in the world, who are at one with us in standing for the faith once delivered to the saints. The importance of coming together is to build one another up, to build the kinds of relationships that enable the deep mission that we're presently engaged in, and also to offer, quite frankly, a way forward for Anglicanism. The primates meeting is broken. Lambeth is broken. It doesn't appear that anything's going to put the system back together. So what's going to supersede it in terms of a tradition that is synodical, that gathers people from all over the world? It's not just bishops, not just clergy, but bishops, clergy, people, to come together and look at the issues confronting the church, to speak together, to resolve together, to act together.
In times past, and we're talking almost 7 years ago, there was actually an Anglican Congress that would meet. Is that something you're looking to?
Well, again, the Anglican Congress was something that led to mutual responsibility and interdependence. The Anglican Congress was the idea of a synodical church, not just bishops meeting. Again, you'll remember that led to what became the Anglican Consultative Council. Again, a structure that's gone off track, but the idea was it wasn't just the bishops. So the bishops are the apostles. They do have the responsibility of guarding the faith and the unity of the church. But for Anglicans, just as in the Orthodox East, the church is not just her bishops, not just her clergy. It's in fact the bishops, the elders, and the people gathered together. I mean, all the way back to Acts 15 and the First Council of Jerusalem, where the whole church was gathered. The apostles finally gave the determination, but it's that vision of a church that's ordered in that way.
Back to the Anglican Church in North America, you just met in Orlando, and in our last conversation we talked about EMEA and some of the relationships with EMEA bishops that you still had on a temporary basis then. What has come about with those bishops?
Well, what we did in Orlando, in many ways, was to put the church back together, as I observed to the bishop after the re-election of Bishops Barnum and Glenn and Hunter, and in fact the election of new bishops who had all been part of the Anglican mission. Of course, we had elected Bishop Breedlove in the fall, and Rwanda had consecrated him. But now we'd also elected bishops Ken Ross and Quig Lawrence, and also Clark Lowenfield, who won't lead a pair network, but will lead an ACNA diocese. But again, he's part of that inheritance. So so much of the pain and suffering, the terrible sense of loss that we began to experience in the spring of 2010, it's taken us most of 3 years.
Sure.
But we're together again, and we'll continue to hold the door open. I think there'll be others who come along, because the vision that God gave back in 2009, and actually the Common Cause days before, of a biblical, missionary, and united Anglicanism in North America, that's still a compelling vision for most Anglicans in North America.
There's other things that were discussed in Orlando. One of the keen things that observers on the outside watch is you guys love to be together. The College of Bishops is really one, and you enjoy being together. Having been to many general conventions, I've noticed a different trend in some areas of the church.
We're working very hard to be a New Testament church. And we're working very hard to be the kind of apostles that we see the witness of in the New Testament. And again, sometimes the apostles get, we can have conflict, but we're convinced that we really do have to love each other. We really do have to be committed to each other. And if we love each other and are committed to each other, in fact, that'll be possible for the whole church. The church will reflect its leaders. The church will especially reflect the behavior of its bishops. So we talked again, and we headed much deeper into how we're going to be together, not only when we are together, but also when we're apart. How are we going to behave in ways that honor the Lord and honor one another? How are we going to not triangulate one another? How are we not going to talk about one another, but instead talk to one another? So we made great strides, but we also faced into some other issues. In my opening address, we spoke about overlapping jurisdictions, and the concern that I have as I prepare to turn things over to a successor, that this be a model Anglican province, that we show the world what it would look like to be an Anglican province. And in fact, in most parts of the Anglican world, there are not overlapping jurisdictions. I mean, obviously there are places where there are, notably in
Europe, yeah.
But also in Eritrea. I mean, there are places where. But our history, we came as a number of lifeboats, and how do we take a view? It's not tomorrow, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, where we really are one church, far more organized in the classic means of geography, though not obliterating affinity. One of the things we came to understand when we were together in Orlando was that of 4 possible means of unity, or as the ecclesiologists would remind us, ecclesial density. Are you a church or a federation? We're actually a church. There are 3 grounds on which we are deeply united. We're not as deeply united geographically. That's the 4th ground. But we're deeply united because we have a doctrinal unity. We're all actually agreed. The Common Cause statement of faith, which is embedded as foundational principles in the Constitution of the Anglican Church in North America, that gives us a unity that most Anglican provinces don't have. Then there's the missional unity. There's really no one who disputes the notion that we ought to plant 1,000 churches, that we ought to reach people who don't yet know Christ. Wouldn't it be great if all the Anglican provinces have that as a piece of unity. And then, as you've already observed, the reality is we bishops actually like one another. We actually want to be together. So there's a relational unity. And I'm glad to hold up to any other Anglican province what a doctrinal unity, a missional unity, a relational unity, and we're concerned about a geographical unity. But if you had to choose 3 out of 4, which 3 might you choose?
I think you got the right 3. I mean, it's been discussed. You started off almost as a flying province, you know, where, you know, you could choose a bishop.
Well, we were rescued,
right.
And we were rescued relationally by the leaders here were tied to leaders in the rest of the world, and it didn't have to do with our geography, it had to do with historic missional relations. So there's a great deal of that, and we've faced into that. But we really want to be what the church ought to be. One could point out that geographical unity was not what characterized the apostolic church. I mean, after all, John was in Ephesus, and Ephesus was in between Syria and Italy, and Paul had those, and you know, so on and so on. So,
well, you know, you talk about what are we going to pass on to your successor?
Yeah.
And you know, the elephant in the room a couple years ago was EMEA, the EMEA, and their desire to work the way they wanted to work, within or without ACNA. The elephant in the room, and I just say this as it's something that you're paying attention to, is women's ordination, and the difficulty of bringing together two, you know, ideals or understandings of women's ordination. When your successor takes over, do you think you will still be dealing with that, struggling with that issue?
Well, what we did, as is well known at this meeting of the College of Bishops, was to put forward a plan for a real theological study on holy orders, which is not just about women, it's about men and women and their leadership in the church. And all of us agree that that the Lord expects that both men and women will lead. The question is, in what roles will they lead? What our college is very aware of, and the world is very aware of, is that the Episcopal Church, out of which most of us came, or the Continuum, out of which some came, the kind of thorough biblical and historic work on what it is that holy orders are, and all of that kind of study was never done. It was politics that drove me. So again, I'm very proud of the bishops of the Anglican Church in North America who've agreed we need to do this study. And as you know, we've put together a theological task force that has scholars who are both supportive and scholars who believe we're in error. We're going to consult with our global partners who are also divided on this, as we'll consult with our ecumenical partners. It'll take, we'll move it along as well as we can. We want to come to a better understanding together. But as I often say, we had a consensus at the beginning, which was a consensus to disagree. And that will be the consensus that stands until a new consensus emerges. We are very clear, and this was reiterated over and over again by bishops on different sides of the issue in our discussion, that we're not going to simply bring this to a vote. We really want to know the Lord's mind and will on this.
That's the interesting thing, is your relationship is really built on trust. If you just wanted to have a vote, it would not be a great outcome. But everybody here wants, and it's built on a trust relationship, and they entered in after Common Cause and the church formed into a very trusting relationship.
Well, again, if your model is a New Testament model, you look at the most difficult missional decision in the apostolic age, which was the inclusion of the Gentiles. And Jerusalem gathered and came to be of one mind about how to move forward. That's the model for the church.
Yeah. Let's move on to Rome.
Sure.
Finishing up here. If people understand the background noise, we're meeting here in a hotel lobby, and it's the best we can do because
it's a little bit of background noise.
A little bit of background noise. You were at the Vatican. You were there for a Wednesday service, the homily.
Wednesday public audience.
Yeah, and you were able to have I'm not sure how this works. Either Pope Benedict got to meet you, or you got to meet Pope Benedict.
The audience, the Latin is to listen.
Sure.
We were able to listen to one another. There were a number of us, Global Fellowship of Confessing Anglicans bishops, who were there together. We really can't say much more about what happened beyond the audience. Obviously, our concern is for the kind of Christian unity that was represented by the Malta Declaration of 1968, and that the early Archic meetings were concerned for, where most of the dialogues in Christian unity have gone. While in the 60s and early 70s there was this sense that somehow the whole church could be brought together, it's quite clear in the early 21st century that there are many who are going to a very different place, and that they'll never be brought together. But some of us still have that hope for a visible unity of the church.
Now,
let me say, I really can't say anything more about what happened there. We're delighted that we're in relationship with the Catholic Church. Certainly at the local level, so many of our parishes have been blessed by the generosity of the Catholic Church, as we've lost buildings and lost vessels and all the rest.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. Pope Benedict wants Anglicanism to succeed.
Yes, he does.
Okay. When he was Cardinal Ratzinger, he wrote a letter to Plano, which you read to the conference. And it was a highlight of our struggles and a recognition back then. The Roman Catholic Church recognizes that the Episcopal Church is in a struggle and something new needs to happen. Something new has happened, and I think it's obvious to all that Pope Benedict is very pleased by this.
Oh, as he wrote to us back in September of 2003, he is very aware that his nation was evangelized by the English. It was Boniface and his nieces and nephews, Walburga in particular, who the English sent to evangelize Bavaria.
Yeah.
And the Pope actually holds that historic debt of gratitude. Of course, there's the deeper connection, which is Gregory I in 596, 597, sending Augustine to Canterbury to reconnect the English. So there is this affection. Vatican II called it a special relationship between the Anglican Communion and the Holy See. And we simply want to see where that special relationship can go. Not to obliterate what we are and the richness of the tradition we have, but for that richness to be more deeply appreciated in the whole of the Western Church. Again, one should observe in the midst of all of this that the Orthodox have been our great friends in this. Again, it was Metropolitan Jonah who began it. He's now been succeeded, and the new Metropolitan is committed to this partnership and our dialogue. Now we have the Russian Church in the person of Metropolitan Hilarion, who's proclaimed publicly that he wants to work with the Anglican Church in North America and is working to move other Orthodox leaders from others of the Orthodox autocephalous traditions toward us. There is a great deal of desire to fulfill Jesus' prayer for unity among all church leaders, and there is a great recognition of what we represent in the Anglican Church in North America and in the GAFCON GFCA movement is something that is common to all the great Christian churches, because what's common is the faith once delivered to all the saints.
Probably the biggest news this fall was that there's going to be there's been a bishop-elect, Archbishop-elect of Canterbury, Justin Whelby. There's a lot of hope we've always put into Canterbury, even back in the Episcopal days. What is our hope for Justin?
Well, we pray for Archbishop designate Justin. Certainly, I've communicated with him as is only right and proper. He does hold the senior see in the Anglican family. We want to work with him. We want to work together for the spread of the kingdom. He has an immense challenge, and I don't think there's anybody who would want to be in his shoes. His great challenge will be, in fact, what to do with us and what to do with the GAFCON GFCA movement. We'll do everything we can to help and to bring the whole Anglican experiment to be consistent with what it really was, its foundation. A Reformed Catholic Church, a biblical Catholic Church, and a missionary church.
I want to thank you for your time. You're going to be off to the airport, off to Washington, and thank you very much, Archbishop Duncan.
God bless you and your work, Kevin, and God bless all the folks who listen to us.